Hello, and welcome to Words and Bubbles. My sixth favourite trade paperback of 2023 is the 8th volume of Montress, which has Inferno as its subtitle, by Marjorie and Sana Takeda. Now I can't simply start talking about Volume 8 as, unless you're already a fan of the series and are up to date with reading it, you'll be completely lost. Which isn't your fault. Some of the blame will fall on me for not being the best communicator, but the lion's share of it will fall on the series itself. This simply isn't one of those books you can read a random issue of and still have some idea of what's going on. This is a complex story that's only getting more complex, which means that I should start with an overview of the series. So, if you are one of those that is up to date with reading, I apologize. Okay, so what is Montress? In broad terms, it's a high fantasy series set in a fictionalized early 20th century Asia, more or less. I mean in the same way that typical fantasy is set in fictionalized medieval Europe, not in the sense that we meet fictionalized versions of famous real-world people from 1917. Other genres of speculative fiction are also represented. Horror and steampunk are the most obvious, but honestly you could place it in any one of a dozen genres and be right. The setting probably reminded me of Avatar: The Last Airbender as much as anything. Actually, more specifically, the sequel to that, The Legend of Korra. But that's just an opinion. And in any case, setting and story are different things, and this story is vastly different. All of that really doesn't matter though. Just look at the screen. Those pictures scrolling by will give a far better idea of what the story is about than words ever could. Even if those words were chosen by someone who was the world's best communicator instead of me. A part of me wanted that to be the entirety of the video. Just Sana Takeda's gorgeous art and silence. I think I might have done it, or at least done it with her, and Marjorie Liu's writing is pretty awesome too, thrown in. Because that's all I really wanted to say here. That both the writing and the art have been consistently excellent. I decided against doing that because of those idiots on TikTok, who copy and paste someone else's video they agree with, and then just add a video of themselves pointing at the other video and nodding. Silent approval felt too much like that. Still, if you'd rather watch that video, I won't begrudge you turning off the volume. The story revolves around Micah Halfwolf, a 17-year-old arcanic. What's an arcanic, you ask? In the known world, that's the world in which Montress takes place. Again, more or less, there are a number of races. Cats, which are very much like the cats of our world, except that they can talk and wear clothes and use weapons and pretty much do anything that any of the other races can, are the oldest. Well, they set foot on the known world first, but not all of the races are native to the known world. Then there are humans. Again, very much like the humans we know. And predictably, again they can talk and wear clothes and that sort of thing. Where they aren't as skilled is with magic. But then there are a few human women who are born with mental abilities that mimic magic. Things like telepathy and fortune-telling. Next are the ancients. These are immortal beings that look like humanoid animals. These ancients were once extremely powerful, but they have been losing this power recently. Getting weaker for reasons that have yet to be explained. Okay, so this is where the arcanics fit in. They are the hybrids of humans and the ancients. And most of them look like they're somewhere between a human and an ancient. So animal traits, but not as many. But a few, including our hero and Micah, look human. Lastly, there are the monstrum, also called the old gods. Immense, almost Lovecraftian monsters that long ago warred with the ancients and were banished. When the story starts, these creatures can sometimes be seen, but they can't interact with the world. So they wander the countryside, their purpose unknown. In a manner similar to the Nightwalker spirit in Princess Mononoke. Naturally, such sights spark speculation. Some claim they are echoes or ghosts of the monstrum. Others, particularly the arcanics, claim that they are gods worthy of worship. Probably partly because the arcanics never inherited a patron goddess like the other, older races. And partly because the return of such obviously powerful beings would be cataclysmic. There are also other races, Oni, Sirens, which in the story are giant mer-people, Draculs, which are kinda like dragons. So far all of those have just been window dressing, so I won't go into details. Now these races don't get on. I mentioned the old gods' war with the ancients. That war nearly destroyed the world, and there have been others. The most recent war was between the humans and the Arcanics. That one happened just a few years before the book started. So everything that happens in its aftermath. The reason for this war is that a militant religious sect called Humia has all but taken over the human lands. Not only is this group of warrior nuns bigoted against non-humans, but is made up of those women with mental abilities, and they discovered long ago that these mental abilities could be heightened through the use of a substance called lilium. And lilium comes from the bones of the Arcanics. And it can't be extracted without killing them. So yes, humans are bad. The Cumia in particular do horrific things. But the Arcanics and the Ancients aren't much better, and the Monstrum are beings that might bring about the end of the world. So it's all pretty bleak. There's no escaping that. Even with the beautiful artwork. Basically, having read all 8 collected volumes, and having met dozens and dozens of characters, I can think of only about 3 who are actually good people. I say about because I can only think of 2, but I suppose there might be someone I'm forgetting. This grimness, this violence, is the one reason I don't fully enjoy the story. That's not me saying that it's wrong to include the violence. The books don't glorify it or anything. They highlight how awful violence can be, how atrocious, which is good. Good but not fun. Atrocities are not fun. Okay, so on that chipper note, back to Micah, the young woman at the center of the story. Who is not one of the 2 good people, by the way. I mean, she is getting better, but I would still rather not meet someone like her. She had a really rough time during the war. She was a slave who almost starved to death, and she lost an arm, so I can understand why she isn't the friendliest. She also had a mother who used her for what she was, rather than loved her for who she was. So what is she? This is where it starts to get complicated. Also, at the beginning of the story we don't know what I'm about to tell you. So if you want to read the books without knowing, this would be a good time to stop watching. Or if you want to see more artwork, continue watching but stop listening. Okay, so we learn that Micah is the last descendant of the Shaman Empress, the first of the Arcanics, whose power surpassed even that of the Ancients. More than that, she was a genius and a prolific inventor. She used these abilities to bring one of the old gods back from banishment, a monstrum named Zin, who is a being whose selfish actions led to the monstrum being banished in the first place. Now the details are fractured here, as this next bit happened 1500 years ago, so the hows and whys aren't clear. But 3 important things happened. Zin and the Shaman Empress fell in love. Secondly, the Shaman Empress created a mask of power that could control the old gods. And thirdly, Zin became trapped within the Shaman Empress. It could have been that it was the Empress herself who trapped him. Zin then basically lived in her blood, and through her blood was passed down through the Empress's direct descendants, giving them increased strength and longevity, but little else, as the old god slept. But as the story starts, Zin begins to awaken. And he's inside Micah when he does, which sets up the dynamic for most of the rest of the series. Micah must come to terms with this monster that lives inside her. This monster that needs to drain intelligent beings of their energy to live, killing them, often without Micah's knowledge, as it can do so while she sleeps. But Zin isn't only a curse. His power and his memories of the past, which are patchy but are slowly being filled in, could be what the world needs to be set right, to stop the wars and the atrocities. Naturally others want such power, or fear it, so Micah and Zin are constantly on the run, hiding, but also searching, for answers, and for fragments of the Shaman Empress's mask, which the Empress broke into 5 pieces and hid throughout the world, possibly in some places beyond the world. The reason she did this is not clear. Micah thinks that it was because the Empress learned how dangerous the mask truly was. That being the case, the half-wolf wanted to find the pieces and put the mask back together, but not so that she can use it. The mask can only be destroyed once whole, and that is what Micah wants to do with it. So that's roughly what the first 7 volumes of Montress have been like. Micah and Zin growing closer, discovering things about their past and about the known world's history, defeating dreadful foes and making allies, and meeting lots of important people who don't fit neatly into either camp, wandering the earth. Volume 8 changes that. Not all of that, but enough that I think it could be the most important chapter of the Monstress storyline since the first. You see, since the start it has been hinted that some of the races who now roam the known world come from worlds beyond the stars. We have also been told that, in the past, some of the natives of the known world have been world walkers, able somehow to travel to these other worlds. There have also been hints of how technologically advanced the world used to be. But we haven't experienced much of that larger universe. Not really. The known world has been a fantasy setting, and these interstellar science fiction elements have always been very much on the periphery. But, by the end of Volume 7, a faction made up of ancients and arcanics, called the Dusk Court, have trapped Maiko within her own mind, within her own catatonic body. That, combined with the grief of learning that she is responsible for her mother's death, is enough to free her soul and send it, along with Zin, to the astral plane. From there a portal opens, and they go through and end up on Golga, the planet on which the monstrum were imprisoned. And here Zin must survive his kin, who, it turns out, he is responsible for imprisoning. To me, this change of setting was stark. Golga and the known world are completely different. I'm sure that's by design, but is it a good design? I, and I'm sure many others, fell in love with Monstress for a number of reasons, but chiefly amongst them were the setting, the art, and the style of storytelling. Volume 8 changes all of that. Suddenly, instead of a fantasy steampunk Asia, we're on an alien world called Golga of all things. And it does feel very Golga-esque, whatever that means. Instead of scenes filled with lush greens and golds, everything now seems surreal purples. Even the way in which Sana draws shadows seems to have changed. And the storytelling? I always had faith in Marjorie Liu. She never told us exactly what was going on, but it always seemed that she knew, that she had planned each revelation long in advance and wasn't writing by the seat of her pants. But at the start of this volume I wasn't sure. Everything was just so chaotic and seemed so random. The characters just ran from fight to fight, from chase to chase. Part of the problem, more than that, having finished the book, I'll now say that most of the problem is just how much new information the reader needs to come to terms with. Yes, there's Golga and travelling through the astral plane, but there's so much more. All the new monstrum, their history and politics and motivations, the floating statues of legendary world walkers, a tribe of exiled cats, body-swap characters, the fact that Maika's allies are also on the planet because of magic I don't properly understand, the fact that a ghost of Maika from when she was a child is among her allies. Zin and Maika have traded places, so now she inhabits his body and appears as a disembodied head linked to him by a tendril. Most of that eventually makes sense, but I still think that it was too much, especially as, while the individual issues had a previously on page, the collected issues don't. Which seems an odd oversight, as it could easily be about a year since a reader read a previous volume. Also, these recaps help to clarify what happened, which would have been helpful. Not that all of this adds up to me thinking that Volume 8 was bad. It wouldn't be on my list if I did. It was just that it was a lot, and it was different. And it took a while to get into its groove. But once I did, well, let's just say that I'm looking forward to Volume 9. I just hope the changes didn't deter many, because I once again think Marjorie Liu has a clear idea of where the series is heading. Okay, so that covers everything I wanted to say about Monstress Volume 8. Thanks for watching, and I hope you come again, and goodbye.